Hello there, all my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these macrame friendship bracelets. And these are the beaded version of my Chevron macrame bracelet, so adding those beads in really give it a different touch. Now I've also made a written and picture tutorial for this design here that's going to be available for sale in my Etsy shop. A link to that is going to be in the description box down below. But if you want to learn it right now, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now the cord that I'm using is this 1mm satin cord in this lovely burgundy colour. And I'm combining that with these 3mm rounds. Now I'm using some metal spacer beads in copper. You can of course use whatever beads you want to as long as you can get the cord through the holes. And finally I have my shank button here that's going to be part of the clasp. Now the material list along with some useful links will be in the description box down below. Otherwise let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then the length of cord we'll need is first of all a length here of about 80 centimeters. Now this is going to be the holding cord throughout. And then we need 4 lengths of about 1.5 meters, and these are all going to be working cords. So first of all here I'm going to be working on my mini macrame board. It has all these notches all the way around, so it's nice and handy to work with. And I'm going to just start out taking my holding cord here, so the short length. And what I firstly want to do is make the loop part. So what I'm going to do first of all with this cord is I'm going to fold it over in half, so put the ends together to then find the middle. Keep hold of that because I want that to be placed in the middle of my board. So I'm leaving that there, and then I'm just going to put the cords, or the cord rather, the ends into the slots. And then I have the midpoint of my cord, the middle of the board, and then also just putting it into the slots there on the bottom, so it's not going to move around while we're working on it. So this is my holding cord. Now I'm then going to grab 2 of my working lengths here because we're going to use them to make the loop with. So first of all what we want to do is also find the middle of them. So make sure all the ends are even and put them together. And then here where I have hold of the middle, kind of a little loop, I'm going to grab hold of that just like before. And again I'm just going to place these into the same slot on the top. Again, so the midpoint of the cords are in the middle of the board. So the equivalent to the other cord there is also the middle. So now I know I need to start making my knots right in the middle of my board here. So all we're going to be doing is a basic square knot. So I'm just going to start with my left side. I'm going to take that over the holding cord. Then I take the right cord over that and bring it underneath, everything in the middle, and then come up through the loop. Now when I'm tightening this, like I mentioned, I'm just going to start with my knots here in the middle of my board. So that's one half of the knot. I'm just going to do the other half, which is then going to hold it in place. And then tighten that. And there we have a full first square knot. Now all I'm going to do is keep making square knots here because what we need is a length of knots that we can turn it into a loop shape. So I'm just going to use these cords for now. And currently what I'm going to do is make half of the length that I need. Now obviously how long a length you need will depend on the button that you're using. But I'm just going to make enough knots here to be half the length I need for the loop. And then once I've done this half, what I do is I flip my board around and then release the 2 working cords on that side, and then I will do the other length, the other half of the length here, and continue, so I end up with a full length. And obviously you can detach your piece whenever you need to, and you can measure it against your button to make sure you get the length that you need. So I have my length of macrame here, and what I'm going to do is start shaping this into a loop shape. So I'm keeping it flat, but I'm just basically bringing the 2 ends together. So something like this. And then I'm just going to double check that the size is correct with my button. So it goes through easily, so obviously it's large enough. But you also don't want it to be too large, so it's going to come out too easily while wearing it. So that's perfect. So now what we want to do is fasten these two ends together down here. So that means the two outer cords, one on either side, are going to be the working cords for this. And the 4 cords in the middle here are just going to be the 4 holding cords, just while we're fastening this together. Now you can attach this to a board if you prefer, it's up to you. But then I'm just going to do a square knot around all these 4 cords here. So start on one side, so do the first half of the knot, and then as I'm tightening it, just straightening out the cords and bring the two ends of a macrame together, and then do the other half to make it a full knot. There we go. Now what I like to do once I've made my knot here, and it's holding tight, is basically just go through what's currently the holding cords, holding on to the knot, and then I'm just pulling one at a time, and then it'll just tighten any loose cords up or anything. So everything sits just right. And there we now have a finished loop ready. So now I'm going to attach this to my board so we can get into the actual pattern. So I've now switched over to working on my project macrame board, and I'm also going to be using these T-pins here to help hold my work into place. So I'm first of all just going to fasten this down on my board, because we have our loop done, so we have some work. And I'm just going to put some pins through some of the knots here. Now I'm trying to go through kind of in between the cords, so I don't damage any of the cord if I can help it. So something a bit like that. And then we have all these cords coming out from the bottom of the loop. Now obviously we have 6 cords, or 6 lengths rather. Now you're going to have the 2 on the outside, those are the ones we made that last knot with. So they're working cords. And then in the middle here, on either side, or the next one in rather, are going to be the short ones. So they are holding cords. And then the 2 in the middle, so again if we take one to either side, are also going to be long. So what I'm going to be doing now is separating these into these groups and working with one at a time. Doesn't matter what side you start with, but I'm just going to put the other ones out of the way. And now what I want to do here is make some more square knots to create a bit of a length before we get into the actual pattern. So, like I said, I'm starting with this group of 3 cords. The middle one is the holding cord, so it's the shortest one. Then I'm just going to start making square knots with these 2 cords around that middle cord. Just regular square knots. And then as I'm tightening these, I'm going to hold the holding cord a little bit outward at an angle, coming away. The first half, and then the other half to make it a full square knot. And now what I'm going to be doing in total here is 4. So I need to do another 3. So this is my second one. So literally just a length of 4 square knots, because that will then be the perfect length or distance that we get to the point where we then can start the main pattern. The third one. And then the 4th and last one. Once you then have this in place, on this side here I started making my square knots with my left cord, which is the way that I naturally work, but that's what I've done on the left side here. Now I'm going to move to the group on the other side and do the same thing. We need that length of square knots, but what I like to do with this design is on the right side I start with the opposite cord, so in this case the right cord. So that's just an easy way to remember it. On the left side I start with the left cord, on the right side, I start with the right cord, and I do that throughout the whole bracelet. Also when we get into that main pattern, but it's the same principle. We're just going to create a row of 4 square knots, and again making sure this comes out a little bit at an angle. Because that's how we create that distance between the two sides to be able to make the pattern how we want it. So just make 4 square knots on this side as well. So now we got these cords in position here, so we also need to incorporate the other lengths of cord, but before we do that, we just need to add some beads. So on either side here, we have a holding cord in the middle. So I'm just going to get a bead at a time, and we need to add 1 bead onto, first of all, the left holding cord, and then also 1 bead onto the right holding cord, because we need to do that before we add the cords in so we can continue and have a cohesive pattern throughout. And now I then grab 1 cord at a time of the remaining 2 we have left, and just like before, we need to find the midpoint, so I'll put the 2 ends together and have hold of the middle here. Now I'm going to just start on the left side, doesn't matter what side you start on. And we just want to attach this using a square knot to the holding cord. Just tighten that. And do the other half as well. And then this is being attached below the bead, so the bead ends up sitting in between 2 knots here. And then just push that up to sit right below the bead. There we go. That's the first one. Grabbing the remaining cord, again, finding the middle, so put the 2 ends together. And I then want to attach that to the right holding cord. Now remember, on this side, I'm starting with the opposite cord. But again, just attach it using a square knot. There we go. And by doing it in the midpoint, we make sure we have as even length as possible to work with. Tighten that. And again, we can just push that up to sit right underneath the bead. So now we have all of our cords attached. And we're literally in a position where we can now get into the main pattern. Now what we've got to get used to is that in between every time we make a knot here, we need to add a bead on both sides. So again, I'm just going to do that first just to make sure I don't forget. So I'm adding another bead on the left holding cord, and then 1 on the right, and it's always on the holding cords here. And they kind of help separate out the knots a little bit as well. So I'm just going to kind of push the knots a little bit in place so we start having the rows that we make coming straight down next to each other. And then we have again these 2 kind of separate groups, but we're going to start kind of working with them together and then cross over in the middle. So on the left side here, I'm just going to start with that because that's kind of the pattern I'm going to do. Left, right, left, right. I'm going to take the 2 inner working cords here, and I'm just going to take them up and over and put them out of the way. And I'm going to make a knot here on the left side. So out of the 2 cords going straight out to the side, I'm going to take the top one, bring it down over the other one. And now what we need to do is for the working cord on the other side, instead of using one of the 2 from that side that I put out of the way, I'm going to take the top one of the inner 2 from the opposite side, so from the right. So that's the top one there. The other one you can just put out of the way. And that's then going to cross over to be the working cord on the left side here, even though it came from the right side. We then just use those 2 cords here to make a square knot. And that's going to sit right below that bead that we added. Now the important part here is to really keep a distance. So figure out the distance that you want between the two sides, and then make sure to keep that consistent throughout. Do the other half. We're just going to tighten the knot in place. So like that. And then tighten the other half. So there we go. I did my knot on the left side, so that means now I need to swap to the right side. Make sure that bead stays up there. So that means the inner cord that I have left on this right side, because we already used the top one, but the single one we have left, get that up and out of the way. And then the cords that are going straight out to the side, I'm going to take the top one over and down the other one. And now what we need is the top cord from the opposite side to the left side. So I'm just bringing them back down, separating out the top one. Can put the other one back out of the way. And that's going to then be a working cord on this right side, so from the left but working on the right. And remember, we're starting with the opposite side on this side, so just do a square knot. And then making sure that this goes right below that bead that we added in. And again, just make sure that we don't pull too tight, because that's going to pull the two sides closer together, which we don't want, because we want to keep that nice and even distance. So just pull it until we have a nice basically cross there in the middle. You can see they're crossing over. So that's what we're going to end up with. Then do the other half. If you need to just retighten or readjust the first half before we tighten the second half, because the second half is what makes the knot stay in place. There we go. So this is the first little crossover point that we've done, and this is basically all there is to the technique. We're going to keep repeating this. So just trying to separate out the cords a little bit. I just did my knot on the right side, so I want to go back on my left side. Now just to note as well, what we can also do is, because we're starting to move downwards now and it is moving around a little bit, we can add in some more pins just to fasten it a bit more in place, and also that will help keep the distance between the two sides. So like that, as you can see. Now moving back to the left side. Now first, the two inner ones here on the left side, where I'm going to make the next knot, I'm just going to put up and out of the way. Now remember, we need to add the beads before we make any further knots. So one bead on the left holding cord, and one bead, if I can find the hole, on the right holding cord, like that. So that's ready for when we get to that side. Now, of the outer two cords here, the top one goes over and down the other one. And then for the right working cord on this side, that's where we need to take it from the opposite side, and it's always the top one that we want to use. And that becomes the working cord on this side here. Just make another square knot. And then tighten this underneath that bead that we just added. And again, making sure we don't pull this too tight. So you just want to keep kind of focusing on that. So you can see we keep an even distance, and you can keep referencing back to your previous ones that you made. Because ideally you want to avoid it starting to get kind of move closer to each other, or even getting too far apart as well. You want to get it as even as possible throughout. So there we go. Now moving to the other side. We have our bead already on the holding cord. Of the outer two cords, I'm going to take the top one over and down the other one. Now, the inner one is up and out of the way. The cord we need to then take to replace it is the top one from the opposite side. And then just make a square knot, starting with the opposite side. So in this case here, I'm starting with the right. Do your square knot right below that bead, and then tighten it by doing the other half. And there we go. Again, get that look where the now multiple cords are starting to cross over each other. And what you can do as well is, I find, if you think where you're working, they're going a little bit too close to each other, once you've made your knots, and do that as you go if you can, instead of kind of undoing them and trying to do them again, it can work kind of pulling them apart a little bit. Just like that, and it'll open up just a little bit. Obviously there's only so much you can do, but that is something you can do just to make slight adjustments as you're going along. So all you do now is continue with this. Remember to add your beads before the next knots. Left side, and then the right side. Take the top one on the outer side, and then take the top one from the opposite side. Always left side, right side, right side, alternating throughout, because that's how we get that crossover effect in the middle. Do your square knot below the bead, moving to the right, taking the top one on the outer side down and over the other one, and now just pick out the top one from the opposite side to make a square knot here. And there we go. Do the other half. And tighten that. And then let's just have a look. You can see what it looks like now. So we get that really nice crossover effect in the middle. And then the beads add a lovely touch going down the sides. So just keep going like this, alternating from side to side until you have the length that you need. So now I got to the other end here. You can see I finished on my square knots and adding those last beads in. So what I want to do now is basically finish off the whole piece, but start working towards where I just need to add in the button as well. So first of all, what we want to do is make a little row of knots on both sides, just like we did in the beginning, to bring them back together. So first of all, you can just separate out the other cords. So all the top cords, so we're just working with the bottom ones now. Again, just one side at a time. Now I'm just going to stick on this side. I've already made my first knot there, and I want to make the same amount of knots as I did in the beginning, so that's 4. So I need to make another 3. So that's 1. And then we have 2. And the last one is 3. So 4 in total, including that first one. Move to the other side, do the same thing. Make an extra 3 knots so we have 4 in total. And then to bring them together, first of all, you can just kind of shape your rows a little bit, push them towards each other so the ends end up sitting right next to each other. And then again, these 4 middle cords are going to turn into the holding cords for now. And we need to use the outer ones here to make a square knot around all of these. So just grabbing those cords, making sure to catch all of those cords in the middle. Before tightening it, I like to just straighten them out. And then as you tighten the knot, you're pulling those 2 rows closer together. The other half, fasten it in place, and I always like to, same again, just pull on the cords here coming out from the knot, just to tighten anything up. So So there we go. We now have these 4 cords coming out from the knot. And what I then just want to do now is get rid of some of these cords here. So I'm going to take my E6000 glue and just a toothpick to apply it. And before I make any more knots, I like to just add a bit of glue here. Just a little bit, doesn't have to be too much. And then I just add it on top of these cords below the knot. And a bit on the back as well. Really doesn't have to be too much. So something like that. And then I start making my next knot. So make the first half of it. And then that glue ends up inside of the knot and keeps everything nicely fastened together. So that's the first half. And I then take my scissors and I go in and cut off 2 of these cords, and I like to take the 2 middle ones. You can let the glue dry a little bit as well if you want to first. Like that. And then I want to finish off the knot, so do the other half. Tighten that. And again we have that glue inside of the knot. And now we're left with 2 lengths of holding cord. And this is then the point where I want to add in my button. So I'm getting that ready, and then we just want to bring both of these cords through the loop. Just do one at a time here. And then push it all the way down so it's going to sit right below those knots that we already made, which are now some of them underneath the button. We can't really see them. Then basically this acts a bit as a bead, because we then take the working cords again, just bring them around, and they're going to go underneath the button, but around the side of the shank part, or the sides. Then we just do another square knot below the button and then tighten that. Do the other half. Like that. And again, what you can just do now, just to make it extra secure, is just add a little bit more glue, because I'm going to make another knot, but you can just add a bit of glue to the holding cords first, just so that when we make the next knot, there's some glue inside of it, and just a bit more security. So make my final knot. And the other half. And I like to do 2 knots after I add the button in, just for extra security as well, rather than just the one. So there we go. Now the button is added in nice and securely. And all that's left to do now really is take this off of our board and then finish off all of these excess cords. Now it's the same on all of them, so I'm just going to show you on one here. If you're using a natural cord, or if you just prefer it, you can go in with some glue and add it to where the cords are coming out from and around the knot. And then once it's dry, just go in and cut off the excess. But because I'm using a synthetic cord, what I'm going to do is singe down the ends. So first of all, I'm just going to start with this cord here. Get the other ones a bit out of the way. I want to cut off the excess, but I want to leave just a couple of millimeters. So something like that. You can remove that. Then I'm going to take my lighter. Now obviously this is a naked flame, so it does get hot. But then you go in and basically singe the end so it melts. You can use the lighter to help push it down. And then that seals it nicely in place. So it's not going to come undone. And it's also still nice and secure. And you just want to do that with all the other lengths as well. And obviously the ones on the end here from that final square knot. So just do that. Then you'll have your finished bracelet. And your bracelet is now ready to wear, so we have this really interesting effect in the middle that's then framed by beads along both sides. And of course it's finished off with a button and loop closure, which makes it easy to put on and off. Now don't forget, if you're interested in the written tutorial for this, the link for it is going to be in the description box down below. It's going to be on my Etsy shop. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.